Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversation together on the open seas.
On the open seas.
Yar.
Yar.
We can't do too many puns,
We're
though.
going to pull back. We're going to reel it in.
By Dredge Joel, not this
Yeah,
Joel.
Dredge Joel says it was over the line. We're going to reel it in.
Too far.
We're gonna pull it back.
Because it's real scary
We're going to reverse throttle.
Time.
We're going to pull back.
Yep.
Oh, that's it. I absolutely promise.
Okay.
The conversation we'll brew today will not be bitter and full of silly puns.
Mm-hmm.
It will be serious, and it will pay honor to the game we're talking about this month, Dredge.
I am so excited to talk about Dredge. It's been so cool to just see the conversations in the Discord, to get the comments via email from the newsletter, because we did take a different tack with this game than we have previously, because this game is by nature a little bit more open when it starts, and I didn't want to prescribe how people would go in and play it. So we took just general questions about horror, about coziness, about fishing, which is going to be kind of interesting to dive into as well, and talked about it as we played the game. So we'll probably hop between the two. We will definitely talk through our experience with the game, as well as dive into the questions that we discussed as a community.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit less of a linear A happens and then B happens and then C happens.
Yeah.
We actually have the map of the game pulled up because it's more, it's very location based. And as we learned in our interview with the Dredge team, they actually started with the locations and then worked backwards to figure out characters and what is going to happen in that space and how do they fit their story within the space rather than the other way around.
Yeah. But I find it interesting because even though I definitely did explore a little bit before I got into the story, I feel like once you get into the story, it does give you pretty significant guidance on, okay, but this is the thing you're going to get next. And so what I loved is that if I ever didn't want to explore, I had something to go back to, but I could just decide, which very early in the game, I actually went to Devil's Spine. Because I was like, I'm just gonna go because I don't think it's stopping me. And it was the worst decision. It was so scary. I hated it. My boat was so slow, because I hadn't upgraded it yet. And it was an actual nightmare. And so then after that, I was like, I'm sticking to the Gale Cliffs, the Stellar Basin, the Marrows. I stuck in that southern hemisphere for so long before I let myself go to the top of the map.
As you might, those of you who have not yet gotten a chance to play the game, as you might guess by the name Devil's Spine, that is the end game quadrant of the map. It is where you go after you have a mechanism to banish some of the evil creatures that will swarm and attack your boat in that area. So going there first when you don't have any of those tools yet,
I wouldn't recommend it. It's possible if you're just a real savvy player, but I am not, and I just panicked. It was great.
It reminds me of Jenny got me to play Outer Wilds a couple months ago. Now one of my favorite games of all time. Absolutely incredible. But I remember the very first time I took off, the planet that I could see was the Dark Bramble. And I was like, I guess I'll go there first. I don't know.
Wait, but don't spoil it.
I won't tell you anything that was there, but that's not as the name Dark Bramble might suggest to you, that is not the first place you should go.
No.
You should go to more peaceful places first. So yes, you went to Devil's Spine first.
I did, yeah. But I guess maybe we should rewind really quickly and let folks know, as with all of our deep dives, this is a spoiler cast. So if you are excited to just hear about the game and just learn about what we thought, some of the connections that we made between the game and our experiences just in life and the media that we got to look at during the month through the newsletter, great. But if you're like, ooh, I'm really hoping for spoiler-free time, listen to the developer interview. I think that's a great alternative, and come back when you finish the game because we're talking about all of it.
We're getting into it.
Yep.
And we got our drinks, so hopefully you have a nice little something little treat.
Cheers.
Clink. I said clink because we tapped our cups together, but mine is paper and hers is plastic, so there was no sound. It was not that nice little taste. So yeah, final little snack, final little drink, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Where did you go first when you started the game?
So for those of you who have not seen it, because we have the map up, the map is essentially broken down into 4 quadrants: northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast, and then there's a middle section. And the middle section is where you begin. It's called the Morrows. And you start at a town called Greater Morrow, and across the bay is Little Morrow. And it is very much like,
so cute.
Here is the place where you can learn a lot of the mechanics of the game. You can easily get to Harbor before things get scary, or as things get scary if you so choose. And I spent a long time in Greater and Little Morrow. I bought a lot of stuff. I was buying upgrades. I was shipping. I was fishing a lot, because, as we are going to discuss a lot in this game, I played this game extremely conservatively, like to the point where I would go fishing, and essentially the central mechanic of the game is, once night falls, panic starts to engulf the world around you and starts to kind of seep into you yourself as the character. But if you go into Harbor before nightfall, you just sleep through all of that.
Just have a nice nap.
I had a very pleasant fishing game for the most part, because I would be like, oh, it's 10 a.m. I got one fish. It's time to go back to Harbor and sleep.
10 p.m. you mean?
No, I mean 10 a.m. Like, I'd wake up at 6 a.m. I would fish until 10 a.m. Yes. And then I would go immediately back to Harbor, and I would sleep the 18 hours until it was 6 a.m. again. Because I was so worried about being out after dark. And what you're going to learn quickly is I missed out on a lot of this game because I played it so conservatively. But in my defense,
but you played it. Yeah, you found the way that you enjoyed it.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what it's about.
And the team supported that. They were like, it's okay. A lot of people played the very conservative route.
Yeah.
I did get some sideways glances when I said I was going back to Harbor at like 10 a.m. But yeah.
I remember you saying a.m. when we were in that conversation. And I was like, he must have misspoke. He must have meant 10 p.m.
No, I did not misspeak. It's like the person who, like, when you play Skyrim the first time, you're like an archery wizard, and it's like, I don't want to get into any combat at all. I will shoot you from a mile away, and that's how I'm going to experience the game. That is my approach to, like, a lot of video games.
What's really funny is with most games, this one, by the end, this one included, I am the opposite. I'm like, I have in most games, I'm like, let's bolster that attack, let's bolster the defense. I'm gonna just like tank it.
Okay.
I love just like being in the front lines, like just mashing buttons and just being in the thick of things. With this game, because I was going in and I was like, it's a horror game, I need to be careful. I did play it pretty conservatively for the first couple of hours. I would say I streamed like the first 2 sections, the Marrows and Gale Cliffs, and that's where I played pretty conservatively. But once I got past Stellar Basin, I would say, I was just like, I'm gonna go out at night. I'm gonna like see, maybe save beforehand just in case something horrible happens, but I'm gonna try and see and go towards the things that I normally would avoid in the night. And it was so much fun to play that way. And I was in a constant like jumpy state with myself, but it was great.
Oh yeah, I bet that really feeds like that adrenaline rush.
Yeah,
you get.
Absolutely.
I got the adrenaline rush, but it was like, oh, something is whispering. I need to go to sleep right now. Right now. Whispers was my threshold for like bad things will happen if I'm out any longer.
Amazing. The adrenaline rush of going to bed on time and waking up well rested. That's the kind of rush we're looking for.
That's the rush I've experienced as a real person my entire life.
Waking up refreshed.
Some people say when you're 80 years old, no one looks back and thinks, I'm glad I got a lot of rest on that night. But they do think I'm glad I went out and did that thing. I strongly believe that I will be the opposite. I'm going to be 80 years old and be like, I got some great rest.
I treated my body well.
Yes. In my teens, I got some really good sleep during high school. That's what I'm going to say.
Oh my gosh.
So I played extremely conservatively. We're going to talk about how vastly different my experience of this game was than Jenny's. But yeah, I spent a lot of time in the beginning at the Morrows, that center point of the game. I did a lot of buffing of my ship and getting upgrades, things like that. How did you spend your opening game? What was your opening game experience like?
I actually tried to cross the ocean pretty quickly. So as the game opens, I guess we hadn't talked about even the story in which the game opens with.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you are a fisherman sailing towards this arrow, the Maros, and once you, well, actually, you don't even get there sort of peacefully. A storm happens, and you actually kind of crash and wash up at the Maros, the Greater Maro, I believe. Mm-hmm. And you meet this mayor who's feels like
gross, instantly sketchy,
not great. Yeah, you get instant vibes that they don't sit right. Mm-hmm. And he pulls a Tom Nook on you, and he's like, "Hey."
He nooked you.
He did. He said, "You don't have a boat anymore, but look, here's a boat. Also, you owe me money. Start working off your debt."
I did not even think about that. You were exactly
instantly was
right.
Like, "Oh my gosh, Tom Nook in every game now." And so you start meeting some of the villagers in Greater Maro. You have the fishmonger who buys your fish, but also seems just a little bit too interested in the occult and the weird anomaly fish as you start to fish and get him some of those. There's like, I forget, the dock worker who is the one who upgrades your ship, and the lighthouse woman who is this old woman who like looks at you funny and sort of is suspicious of why you're there and really treats you kind of oddly for a new person.
I think, yeah, both like the mayor and the lighthouse worker feel like opposite sides of the same coin. Yeah. They both give you the vibe that they know a lot more than what is on the surface, and they know what's actually up. But the difference is the lighthouse worker gives you that like, I'm gruff, but you get like a positive read, I think, on their vibe. They pass the vibe check, if you will, and the mayor fails that vibe check pretty hard.
For sure. I remember feeling like there was some weird, like she knew more about you than you knew about her for some reason, but you're just like, I don't know why I feel that way, but I do feel that way. And with the mayor, I also felt like he knew a little bit more about me than I knew about me, but I felt very skeeved out by it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he puts in a position of power over you by taking this nook.
I know.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, but as far as first actions, I mean, I tried to start sailing almost immediately out of the Maros. After I did a couple of fishing, I was like, hey, I see some islands out there. And ultimately, I first tried to go to the Gale Cliffs. Wasn't super successful. I kind of kept going out and having to come back because I wasn't able to get farther fast enough, and I took sort of this roundabout way up to Devil's Spine. That was not good. And so after that, I just ended up following the storyline, which is I visited the Blackstone Isle, which had this mysterious manor on it with this mysterious man who earlier you had met him in the town, and he said, hey, come to my manor. I have like something for you to do, I think is the gist of what he was saying. And you get this quest, which is very weird because he's like, I'm a collector. I have these 5 items that I want you to collect for me.
5 relics.
Yeah, 5 relics. And you're just like, okay.
I'm a fisherman, but sure.
Yeah, let's dredge up some relics. And so, yeah, I guess let's pause because I want to hear more about your initial forays.
So I did a lot of those character interactions that you're describing early on. One that I referenced in the interview with the team that was one of my favorite things to do in the game early is you meet there's one woman that you meet on the Maros that is trying to build like a home or build like a little spot on a very small island close to the Maros. So that was actually like probably the first and maybe the only side quest that I really did to completion because it felt safe. And I had such a positive experience with this one character that I had like a very one-sided romance, I think, with her.
That.
I was telling the devs, it was like, I went basically like you finish off this side quest with like 3 little chores that you do for her, and she builds her house, and then you can like go and rest on her dock, but like nothing else happens. The dialogue is the same. She's just there, and that's it. But I went back like throughout the whole game. It was like my safe place. It was like I would go back there in the hopes like, oh, maybe there's gonna be like a nice little like something extra I can build a relationship, because she was the only person that felt like very genuinely good.
That's amazing. amazing.
Everyone else, you're going to get like some degree of skeevy vibes. The shipwright that like works in your ship, she's fine. The woman that like you sell your fish to that travels around and it just happens to be wherever you are, generally fine. But like, this is the one person that I was like, oh, like what a wholesome connection I've built here. This is going to be my safe harbor.
I love it.
As the game continues, however, it becomes clear that no, there's a reason that almost every character in this world is a little bit or a lot of bit off. So maybe we should just like introduce this like very broad concept of eldritch horror.
Yes.
So this game definitely fits into the eldritch horror genre.
Yep.
Eldritch horror, a lot of it comes from H.P. Lovecraft, who's a huge shithead, and we don't support him and his racism and like just a bad dude. We don't support that. He did, however, in many ways launch this genre of eldritch horror, which is like, think there are these dark gods that are bigger than anything you can conceive of, that through adjusting the mental state of the people in our physical world can kind of exert their influence. And that's kind of tends to be a lot of the hallmarks of eldritch horror. And so what you were experiencing with Dredge is the fishing version of that. So everyone in this town, everyone on the islands that surround, they are slightly twisted, and it is early on introduced to you that like there's like their monstrous presences here of supreme power, and so you understand immediately like that there is a force beyond this world that is twisting these people.
Yes. And the game itself and your place within this game is really obscured at the start, because you just show up and you're doing your job fishing and collecting these relics. But scattered around the world are messages in a bottle that provide a lot of context as to your role in all of this sort of twistedness of the world that's been happening and has happened.
I think it's a really good point, important point to hang on for a second, which is like, you are part of this story. Like, you are set up initially to believe that you are just a random fisherman who's here to replace the last fisherman. But between these bottles and like townspeople will like everyone that you meet will regularly ask you like, who are you? What are you doing here?
Yeah.
And you can respond to say like, I'm just here to fish, or you can respond in other ways. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
There are a few interactions that do tip you off a little bit to like jump slightly forward, particularly with like the old women at the lighthouse. And then later on your adventures, you do meet characters that make it a bit more explicit. But I remember relatively early on, there's a conversation you have with the lighthouse worker, and she does say like something along the lines of how you look familiar. And at that point I was like, there's so much attention that she has placed on me, and she keeps having these conversations. Why do I look familiar? And with the notes, the way that I started piecing it together before I knew sort of the end game and the end story was you learn about a captain who had married a woman. They were sailing and they had unearthed I think it was a casket that they had opened and unleashed something from within. And for most of the game, I was trying to debate whether or not I was the captain, whether or not I was on the ship, who I was, because there was something about that where I was like, I know that we had to do with that event. I know we're a part of it. And I just couldn't figure it out until later in the game.
Yes. Oh, wow. So Jenny picked up very quickly. You picked up very quickly that like you were part of this larger story. Maybe because I was playing so conservatively. I did not pick up that I was explicitly part of a larger narrative until like maybe I was 90% through the game. Like,
wow,
it was like I was like, okay, something is going on here, and like this collector that wants you to get things is obviously shady, and I just thought my part is to facilitate this shadiness, and I didn't really ask questions. I was like, well, when someone was like, well, what are you doing here? I'd be like, well, I'm just here to catch fish, because no one has explicitly told me that I'm doing anything else. And I gotta say, you went back and you played it again, right? After you.
Yes, I didn't finish it again, but like I'm replaying it because I also want to try and catch like all of the aberrations and all of the fish. And I'm back at Twisted Strand, the mangroves kind of area. So I'm almost done with my like second full replay.
Yeah, and you were saying that like the second time through, you caught even more clues.
Yes, yeah. If we want to like go full headfirst into all of the spoilers, all of the
Let's do it.
Not burying the lead. Okay, so throughout the game, okay, hold on, rewind. At the end of the game, you learn that you are in fact the captain of the ship that had dredged up basically the world's nightmares, the eldritch horrors, and you are the collector, you are the fisherman. They are one and the same, and you have been doing this gathering of items to try and resurrect your wife who had died in a boat accident.
Sorry, I want to clarify what you just said. Okay, so you are, as this new coming fisherman, you are the old fisherman captain that like you are supposedly replacing.
Yes.
And you are also the collector, the creepy guy on the island that is asking you to fetch artifacts.
Yes. And what I'll do, this is a note to myself as well as just I'm going to verbalize it. I'm going to put up a picture that shows the image of the collector for folks watching on YouTube, because when you look at the image that they have, the portrait for the collector, he is always within a frame. And I initially was like, wait, that must be like a door frame, right? But when you look at it, it looks very much like the reflection of a mirror.
It's a mirror frame. You are oh my God.
It's absolutely wild. And I noticed that the second time I played, and my mind was blown. And a few other details that reinforce this sort of duality of your personality. When you look at the very opening scene, this is what just knocked me off my feet. The very opening scene when the fisherman is, you're chugging along on your tugboat, you see the job advertisement on the dashboard of the ship. You also see the red book, the collector's book.
What?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
What?
That's because like, I should have screenshot it. I'm going to have to go back and screenshot it and I'll put it up for folks watching on YouTube. But you see a red book that I'm pretty sure is the collector's book on the dash. So
the collector, whenever you see him, his portrait, he is like holding the red book. So you learn as you progress through the game, it's a really important artifact.
Yes.
So you see it in the opening.
You see it in the opening. It's right there. It was a severance moment for me, honestly. It was one of those like, oh my gosh, it's so worth playing again. And you also, what I realized is this other reflection aspect. When you first meet the collector, he like pokes his head in the portcullis of the fishmonger shop, I think is where you're located, or somewhere in the town. And I'm pretty sure that's another instance of you seeing your own reflection in what is a window, like a rounded window. So there are all these moments where you are told through these visuals that this is actually you, and you don't know it until the very end when you break the mirror and you see this sort of cycle finish. Which, to bring this back to the conversation we had with the devs, I believe Joel was the one who mentioned that this is a game about halves, the day and night cycle. And I was like, also the duality of what happens when you're grieving, right? You have this one person who is just ready to like almost seek revenge and do whatever it takes to get her back. And then you have this fisherman who kind of is just like almost processing by not processing, like just not even thinking about it. I thought
That is brilliant. There's more to. I'll add another like kind of mechanical layer to it. So as you are going on these quests for this artifact collector, who is you, after you collected a relic and you take it back to the collector, he pulls out the red book. He reads something or casts some sort of spell, and then you unlock a new like power. So like the first power is like your boat has like a turbo button, basically.
Yeah.
But the idea that you are split, that these are two parts of you, and like maybe the corrupting influence of the collector, if you will.
Yeah.
The idea that you are unlocking these capabilities within yourself is fascinating.
Yeah. And what's really cool, and like shout out to community member Smolecule. Some of you know them as Michelle, but she hosted a tabletop RPG the other night called Bluebeard's Bride. And that's another game that we have mentioned in the newsletter. that also deals very heavily with like women's issues, particularly in this context of like getting married, but also deals with sort of fragments of personality and how different parts of you can come out in different situations and how different parts of you will approach the same situation in really different ways. And so I thought it was like a really cool just media connection, both playing this game, Dredge, and playing that game, Bluebeard's Bride. So if anyone's really interested in thinking about this a bit more and exploring it, I highly recommend checking it out. And if you have a group of people you're comfortable with, getting together and playing it, because it was very, very fun.
Playthrough. Yeah, that'd be fun. God, the fact that like you're just blowing my mind. I feel like, so Jenny and I have been talking about this obviously a lot over the last couple of weeks. And it's like every time we have a conversation, even after I finish the game, I'm like, what do you mean that X, Y, and Z exists? I didn't get any of that. So let's actually start with something that you referenced earlier.
Yeah.
And that is that you, as you go to different areas, there are often messages in a bottle that you find and you read, and you're, reading these messages between two people. And I collected them. Maybe certainly not all of them, certainly not in a logical order, because I tried so hard. I was reading through and I was like, okay, there's a really interesting story here happening between these two people. You were part of writing those letters, like your character was.
Yes.
So like it's part of the story. It's part of how your character fits into the overall narrative. And
to be fair, you don't know that your character is the one who wrote some of that. Well, and actually, they never explicitly state. I started calling the wife Julie because the boat was named Julie, and I assumed that the captain would name the boat after his wife. Because
there must have been something else there,
J.
because I did not realize that. I did not see that the boat was called Julie, even though I spent a lot of time on that boat. But somehow,
this was the captain's boat in the notes, the one that had the like tragic befall.
This makes sense.
Yes,
I'm following now. Sorry.
You're like, I didn't call my boat Julie.
Yeah, well, I was like, I somehow did know that the woman's name was Julie. Is what I was saying. It's like, so maybe it must be somewhere else in the game too.
Don't know if it is. I think that was me hypothesizing.
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. I learn a lot from Jenny every time we talk.
Well, and I'm like scrambled because I'm like trying to put together notes from the past into what we played as a present day player, and like there's hypothesis mixed in. But yeah, to find a path and follow it, there are notes scattered about. I think the vast majority of them are actually written by the wife of the captain.
Yeah, I think so.
And in one of the notes, she talks about how the captain does this like ceremony to like dispel evil, essentially, or just like rename the boat. And it was like a super important ceremony. He's very superstitious. And she doesn't take his superstition seriously and like keeps a part of the old boat, which is like not a good thing. And
I think I missed this one.
In keeping that part, she basically ruined that ceremony. And in the ceremony, I believe they were renaming the boat to Julie. And that's why I assumed her name was Julie, simply because the initials on like one of the pieces of jewelry was a J, and that's kind of a thing. Like I figured a captain would name the boat after his wife, because that seems like a thing a captain would do. I don't know.
Are you telling me that the relics are somehow also connected to the main character?
Oh boy, I sure am. At least that's what I think.
Well, everyone, for those of you that have not played Dredge, hopefully you're still listening to this, because you probably are just as aware of Dredge as I am, having already beaten it. Like, I cannot believe this. Okay, so number one.
I think that's the beauty of this game, though,
yes,
right?
I had a great experience. So I should clarify, like, I love this game. I had fun playing it. It gave me just enough of an adrenaline spike while I was, like, the whispers would start and things that I was like, okay, like I'm nervous and I'm scared and I'm ready to go back to bed. And so like, I had a great time. And like, one of the things we talked about with the devs is you did not have to fully understand all of the subtext of this game to enjoy it and to even understand the ending.
Yeah.
However, the fact that you are now telling me that this central like quest line of the story is you're like collecting these artifacts is that you are collecting artifacts related to Julie and to this initial like ceremony. Well, I really wish I would have understood that.
Well, what I love is that I feel like for me at least, and I've been playing a lot of games that are very like detective notes based games. Like, I think what people have been starting to call them are like knowledge based games. And I say that with quotes because it's like I feel like it puts a sort of weird pressure on the player, or I don't know, there's a connotation. But I think this genre of game that really encourages the player to like physically take notes, put together clues. If anyone's familiar with the indie game Case of the Golden Idol or even Outer Wilds, like those are games that require a lot of investment on the player's part to like find that there is a puzzle there in the first place, and then to put the puzzle together. And I find a lot of intrinsic enjoyment in that. I've discovered that I love a good puzzle when it's narratively structured. And so for me, I saw the notes in a bottle and like I knew this was a fishing game, but I immediately was like, okay, notes in a bottle. Like that's going to be my focus. And I spent a lot of my attention eventually like thinking about that rather than fishing, which is why I wanted to play it again, because I was like, I actually want to do more fishing this time around.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am normally, and this is actually one of the questions that we had, is like neither of us had stellar fishing game experiences prior to this. I referenced Sonic Adventure 2 and Big the Cat being absolutely my least favorite thing in any video game I have ever played ever. But I spent a lot of time just catching fish and like I enjoyed doing it. I thought it was a fun, like the way the mechanic worked, it was like almost like a timed rhythm type game to make it to like reel things in. The devs also mentioned you actually don't have to press anything. You can just like, if you're willing to use the time, you will catch things. Like I thought that was so interesting. And the fact that like I, for the first time in my entire life, spent all my time just catching fish and selling them and getting money and upgrading my ship. And you spent so much time on the bottles and the story. What an incredible like change of experience from what I usually do.
It's great. And I love it because again, it affords the opportunity for players who like really love the fishing, if they have the chance to revisit it. Like what I love, I call it marinating. I do that with choreography and with games, where it's like the first time you learn something, you are primarily reacting to it. You are not actually internalizing it. And that's why I really like playing, especially the last couple of years. I've tried to play games more than once if time allows. And that's also why I play short games, is because it allows me to first react to it. And then the second playthrough allows me to like internalize it in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I think this game is really cool because I could very well see some players play it twice and get a very similar experience both times, but I could also see some players playing it twice and getting a totally different experience because they'll start seeing things that they didn't that first time because they now have the space to like look at other things.
Let's talk about how different of an experience you can have playing this game.
Yeah, so, tell me about your experience.
As we mentioned, I played very conservatively, and we also talked about how once the sun goes down, the world around you starts, like a little eyeball opens in your heads-up display,
right?
And that's to indicate that like there is a presence in the world that is awake during this time. It is exerting its influence on the world around you. And if you are out in that for long enough and you don't sleep, eventually it starts influencing you as well. So it starts simple, like the world around you starts taking on kind of a reddish haze. Some mist will come in. Eventually you'll start seeing little like shimmers in the air that are like whispers that will follow you around and increase the panic that you feel. Eventually you'll start seeing little eyes kind of watching you from the water, or shapes underneath the boat.
So good.
And I never saw anything more than that before I would go to bed. Oh, and like sometimes you like see a little shape in the water and say like something has shimmered into your boat.
Yeah. Did you ever check your cargo when that happened?
Okay, I was going to ask you about this. It happened to me a lot.
Yeah.
I could never figure out what happened afterwards. What actually was happening when things got onto your ship?
So For one, when I noticed and when I remembered to check the cargo, because sometimes I was like, nope, I'm busy, I gotta focus. I noticed that when something slithers on your ship, not all of the time, I don't think, but some of the time, it'll corrupt a fish and it'll have like this different animation that's like bubbly and like black and purple.
Yeah.
And so it like actually infects a fish. And I don't know what happens if you just leave it there, because I always either tossed it or sold it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't want to play with this. But yeah, so it does
Oh.
actually have moments where it impacts your actual cargo. And sometimes, because you would feel, at least on the Steam Deck, you can feel like the vibration of when something might slither up your boat.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that it didn't happen every time.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Which that was so good, because I'd see the ripples kind of coming towards me and I'd be like, oh, no, 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 no. And then sometimes it would just fade.
Yeah. Wow, you're totally right.
Mm-hmm.
That was the experience. Do you know, I remember the first time that something slithered on my boat, and it was when I found one of the things that you can do is you can find like a stray puppy on one of the beaches.
No.
And the first time that something slithered on my boat was right after I picked up this puppy, and I was like looking for a new home for it.
Yeah.
And I was terrified that something was going to happen to this dog, and nothing does.
Yeah.
So nothing does.
Good.
We got the dog rehomed. It was fine. But I remember being so scared when that happened. I was like,
oh, man,
it's not just me anymore. There's an innocent among this ship.
That's exactly what I thought too. I think that was maybe my favorite side quest of all the side quests, mostly because you're so lonely for most of the game. I think there's this element of just loneliness that happens because you are this by yourself on a boat, having to deal with all of this stuff by yourself. Like, you don't have anyone to talk to. And so having the puppy, I actually rode around with it in my boat. I was like, oh man, I really hope I can't like knock into anything. I can't go anywhere super dangerous because I can't risk this puppy like getting knocked overboard. But I really, really like having this dog with me for a little bit. So I actually rode around and just used that as a chill time to just fish and build up some money, because I was like, I want this puppy to stay here.
Yes. Unfortunately, I think you find it in Stellar Basin.
Yes.
Which has, it's one of the early game places you can go. It's just like a big circular area that has like an ultra deep chasm in the center. You know, where a kraken lives.
No big deal.
No big deal. So I think my boat only exploded like twice the whole time I played the game. And one of the times was in the basin. Well, when you play very conservatively, it's a lot easier because the kraken lifted its tentacles and destroyed my ship. And that's what happens.
Like, I think my boat exploded like 2 times in the Gale Cliffs alone.
Okay, so let's come back to this. Like the difference in experience. So I just told you the only things that I experienced related to the madness and like nighttime.
That's it?
Yeah, that was it.
Wait, no tentacles?
No tentacles.
No growing vines?
No growing vines.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so that just tells you like how straightforward most of my gaming experience was.
Yeah.
There was, when you go to Devil's Spine at the end, there are these like lantern fish type things that will swarm your boat, but they are literally there. Nighttime, daytime. They're not part of like the panic necessarily.
Right.
But everything that you have told me over the last week about how incredibly detailed and like the lore that is existent within the panic, could you just like give us a taste? Like what happens besides those little like lightweight things that I experienced?
Oh my gosh. And what I loved is that the things that I experienced weren't like, okay, there were a couple of moments that were actually quite terrifying, but for the most part, they were also very much in the same vein of they didn't happen all the time. They often like were just close enough to maybe do harm, but maybe not. And so there was this, again, we talk about it a lot when we talk about compelling horror this month. There's a lot of play with tension and not actually having a jump scare happen, which I really love. So there's always the anticipation of like, something could go really, really wrong if I were to pursue this. And then do I risk assess myself and say, yes, I'm going to try and pursue it or no? One of the things that I was showing Joel when we were talking that very early on in the Morrows, there is a shadowed ship that looks very much like yours, like another dredging boat. I don't know what the name, the vessel. And very early on, I was like, that doesn't feel right, because you've been sailing alone for a decent amount of time, at least by the time I had seen it. And I was like, I don't know if there's another boat, but maybe it's a friendly. And so you go up to it, and if you do go up to it, you quickly learn that it is not just a boat, but it is the top of an anglerfish, and it is fishing for you. And you can try to outrun it, but especially at the beginning when your boat's not upgraded, it's not really happening. And you can maybe take a couple hits if it's like just barely misses you. It sort of gets like a side swipe. But yeah, that's pretty certain death. Pretty certain boat crash. Similarly, there is like a giant mansion that you can see floating around. And I never saw anything totally rise up from the depths when I went up to it. Both times I tried. Once it sort of just faded, like it wasn't even there. And the other time it looked like a giant dark mass just like went down into the depths. And so I was like, I don't know if I actually want to see this. So that was sort of the extent of that experience.
Can I just say, houses where they are not supposed to be. Yeah. I think we've talked about this in another episode, but it's just like one of my favorite things. Good. And when you said that, it took me from like, well, yeah, I missed some of the scary stuff, but it's okay. But when you said there was a house out there that I didn't see, it was just like,
damn it,
Joel, you missed your favorite thing in media. Unbelievable.
The Tropes in Hollywood website probably has that as Joel's favorite.
Joel's favorite things include houses where they're not supposed to be.
Yep.
Yeah. So I can't believe I missed out on that.
Yeah.
What else? What other parts of the experience did you have that were like panic meter is high?
So one thing that I thought was really, really interesting is that when your panic meter is high, there are certain stones that you have access to that don't activate when you are well rested. Which, as a side note, the play on like not having sleep, I think is super interesting, because did you get the note with the engagement that talked about the engagement?
I think so, but could you remind me?
Yeah, so one of the notes in a bottle that you find from, again, presumably the wife who I'm calling Julie, she talks about how she and the captain are staying up super late to try and see the aurora borealis. And that instantly brought me back to the sort of color scheme that we see in the ocean when we are also not sleeping. And she uses the words like we were delirious from the lack of sleep. And I was like, that if they're in the same place, I feel like that can't be a coincidence. Like that feels intentional. Although I don't think that could have been super, I don't know, because this was before they unearthed the casket. So maybe it's not, but it felt very like, there's something in this area that at least maybe leads itself to more of a.
I feel like that really resonates though. I feel like in a lot of the like eldritch horror genre, there is usually a kicking off event, like for example, dredging up a casket, but those forces are always at work in the world, like calling to people. And so if what you're saying is there was this note about like the delirium because of lack of sleep, I think that makes total sense. I think it's a great read.
I'm not super familiar with like eldritch lore, and so definitely you are the expert on this.
I am not an expert. I've only read like two or three things, but I would, just as a quick side note, definitely recommend The City We Became. It's a relatively recent novel by N.K. Jemisin that is incredible if you're into eldritch horror, that also like explicitly deals with kind of the racialized or like the racist history of eldritch horror. So like it does a great job of dealing with that. And she's a great author. So
yeah, I have not read that one, but I really adore that author. But yes, so that note I thought was particularly interesting. Okay. What was the horror that we were trying to talk about before?
Well, I want to talk about these stones for a second, because the developer team talked about this.
Yes.
And I kind of nodded along like, yeah, the stones that glow.
Yes. And so that was the connecting thread. Thank you. So the lack of sleep is what tipped me off to try this out with the stones, because every time you go up to the stones and you are well rested or it's during the day, you just get a note that's like, the stone was warm to the touch or cold to the touch, nothing happens. And one of my forays out at night when I was like, I'm just going to see what I see, panic meter, be damned. I went up to the stone and I saw that it was glowing an ominous red, sort of like my panic eye was glowing and twitching red. And I touch it and it actually started to describe a vision that was essentially some sort of like Cthulhu Eldritch X-esque apocalypse. Like the cities were flooded, the people were, everything was kind of being laid waste to by this powerful force. And so when you go to the different stones, you get these visions and these snippets of what could be, should, I think, you resurrect or bring back like Cthulhu or whatever you're trying to like bring back.
Well, you don't know that, right?
You
like
don't
your
know
character
that.
doesn't know that you're trying to bring something back or release something. Like your character's like, oh, I'm just here to fish and like help this guy collect some missing glasses or whatever.
Yeah,
So when we were talking with the development team and they indicated that the stones were one of the ways that you can really engage with the deeper narrative that's happening. Again, I was just kind of nodding along. I was like, yeah, like I remember there being glowing stones. I never once unlocked any of these described visions. And I even touched them at night when the eye was out. So I think it has to, my guess is, it probably is not just that it's night and the thing is awake, but I think you must also be at a certain point of delirium for that to work.
I think so too, because I'm pretty sure every time I touched the rocks, it was like when my eye was at its widest, at its most like sort of twitchy, sort of chromatic aberration sort of form. And I don't think I ever consciously was like, I am going to do this and then find a stone, because I also always happened upon them. Because I was this was before the map update.
That map update is clutch.
Which I wish, oh my gosh, I wish on my first playthrough I had it, because it would have made things so much more efficient. For folks who aren't familiar, right after launch, like a couple weeks after launch, the developers put out an update that was incredible for quality of life. One of the biggest benefits is that the map previously was not editable in any way. So you couldn't put down markers to help remember certain key points or items or fishing areas.
You couldn't really zoom in.
You couldn't zoom in. It was just a very basic map of locations and where you were. And after the update, you can actually start marking things down, which is a huge help. And so I think, again, second playthrough, it's like, okay, this is feeling so much better.
Yeah, the update did come out before I finished the game the first time, so I definitely got to play both versions of it. And the team talked about how like they were watching people play it and they wanted to like, oh, the thing that people are struggling with here is not the thing we actually want to be a struggle, so let's fix that. And I was like, the fact that this team was so responsive to the community and able to like put those types of quality of life improvements in, absolutely hats off. Like what a cool way to do work.
Super powerful. Yeah, you always love to see when a dev team is able to do that and have the flexibility and the agility to respond that way. So yeah, hats off for sure. I'm trying to think, what were the other, because I feel like there was one other update element that was like really cool that I'm blanking on right now. Maybe it'll come.
Yeah, I can't remember later. Either.
But it was really cool. And they, I think, said that they have a few more content updates on the way too.
Oh, cool.
So for folks who are like interested in following the developers, please do. I think they have maybe more in store.
Yeah.
So that's pretty neat.
So we've kind of already talked about like the big reveal of the game.
Yes.
But I would love to talk about some of the like the central plot and subplots that you can experience a bit too. Is it okay if we start with some subplots?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I like the subplots in this game.
Okay, so I will tell you the one that I found to be, apart from my builder, whom I love, apart from her, one of the like sub stories that you engage with that is in Stellar Basin is there is an old fortress nearby where there's a researcher, and she was doing research in the basin. You can like happen upon the old research station, and if you hang out there for too long or don't know what you're doing, you can get attacked by the Kraken that's in that basin. But it was through her that you start to understand these like abyssal forces and hadal forces, so like things that live in the abyss, things that live at like Hades level, hadal and abyssal, and she's the one who kind of helps you engage and like, get to those deeper spaces. And she's also the first one that really, I think, acknowledges that there are monsters here in this world. But it's not even the first monster you encounter.
No, it's the second.
It's the second one, right?
It's the second like main quest one.
It is a good point.
Yeah, if you're in the Maros and you happen upon the anglerfish, maybe that was the first one. But definitely in the Gale Cliffs, everyone's like, "There's a giant snake around here," but everyone's kind of just like, "It just showed up."
Yeah.
But I guess this is life now, which is really fun.
Very chill.
Which I guess if you can't do anything about it, like I think about the things that I have no power over in the world that are just like, that are equivalent to being a giant snake and, catastrophic monster. Yeah. And I'm like, I guess there are those things in life where I'm like, yeah, it's here and we just learn to live with it. So I guess I could relate.
There's an island. There's an island the size of Texas made out of trash in the ocean, and I guess it's just here.
We're going to live with it. It's kind of wild. I saw a thing on it, side note, where someone was like, there are actually biomes of bacteria, jellyfish, and fish that now live in these giant plastic islands because they've had to adapt. Whoa. And so now what's really interesting is that in addition to like needing to clean out plastic from the ocean, there is the layer of consideration now where there are populations of creatures living within it. What do we do? Because we don't want to decimate the populations that live within that as well. Wow. We have created layers on layers of problems, but that's a whole different story.
The truth is, this whole game is about cleaning up the ocean.
I forgot to ask the devs this, but I actually was really curious because there's an achievement that you get if you overfish a certain amount of times where it's like when you deplete an area. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm like, there's nothing in this game that has really overt environmental
and there's no negative impact for
and there's no negative impact, but I was like, especially living on New Zealand, which is a very like fragile ecosystem because
the development team
the development teams from New Zealand, I wonder if they have any background with fishing with this, like, I don't know, every time you overfish an area it felt sort of personally significant, and then to get an achievement for it, which felt like not an achievement I'd want to get. I thought that was just really interesting, and I don't know if they meant anything by it other than, hey, it's an action that we think the players are going to do a lot. But it did feel like,
I just accepted so much of this game on its face during my playthrough. That, like, the idea that, like, I know that depleting an ecosystem is bad in real life. I know this. But it didn't even occur to me in this game that it could be a negative thing. I was just like, I'm a fisherman, and there's 5 fish here that are the type that I need. I'm just going to get them all. I didn't even consider the idea that it might be bad.
Yeah, well, and I don't know, maybe I tend to overthink some of these things where I'm just like, everything must have a meaning. I'm sure and then the devs are probably like, no, actually at some point you need to stop fishing in an area, and that's why we just stop it after 5.
You should have a podcast.
Oh my gosh, you think?
Yeah. I mean, the way if you're going to like overthink things about games anyway, maybe you should just talk about it.
I don't know. Should I rope in a friend to do it as well?
Bring in a novice. Bring in the person that's not going to be thinking critically as they play.
No, oh my gosh.
Okay, so we dive in. You have the side quest. You're helping this researcher, and the idea is you have to build like a disrupting signal on this old research platform that's been destroyed essentially by this Kraken monster. And I thought like it's a straightforward storyline, but it was one of the first times that I was like, there are normal people here that are just trying to like quote do their jobs and that recognize that something is weird about this place. But that is definitely not the case all the time.
No. And actually it is kind of interesting that now that I hear you say it out loud, I'm like, yeah, it's weird that the researcher was another character that gave me good feelings.
Yeah, I agree.
Whereas like the mayor and pretty much everyone else didn't. Like I was like, I didn't feel animosity or anything to everyone else, but I definitely felt like I needed to be on my toes for some reason.
Well, each of the 4 quadrants has like a side character that you are trying to work with to like you have to do some major task in order to unlock the area to get the relic. Like that's kind of the central thing that is happening in the game. But I agree. I think the researcher is the only one of the 4 spaces that you go to that feels like I am not a twisted freak, I guess, in some ways. I mean, I do want to get into the freakiness of the other 3, but like, yeah, the researcher seems legit.
Right. And side note, just to go back into like the lore of it all, my theory is that the researcher is related to the wife. She says something, which I'm just like, wait, because she said something about how she's getting messages in a bottle from her sister. And I was like, we're getting messages in a bottle from someone who could potentially be her sister. Because if you think about it, maybe they're all family and they live in the same region, right?
You are totally right.
So I was like,
I remember that line now.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, I'm pretty sure that they're related. So that was kind of a like,
Jenny comes through again. Oh my
You had the lore for bug snacks, so I'm holding down the fort for Dredge.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Okay, so the only other side character in these quests that is giving you good vibes is perhaps the sister of your dead
deceased
wife.
Yeah.
Who was part of perhaps this whole area getting corrupted.
Yeah.
That also might explain why she, like, this researcher has been living on this old fortress island for we don't know how long, but since her research station, her primary research station was destroyed in the basin. And so it might help explain why she is so committed to continuing this research.
Yeah.
If she has this familial tie and she's trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. And you are right. To your point earlier, she is the only one who is like explicitly saying the presence in this basin is harmful to everything else. Like she talks about how the actual like organic ocean life that's supposed to be here is reducing. Like she's talking about how
and being corrupted.
Yeah. And then that's when I was like, again, the environmental stuff. I'm like, what? But I think that was probably a stretch.
No, I think it's a reasonable, you know, it's the old like literary criticism. Nothing happens outside of the text, right? Like you see something and I think you're justified to see it. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. As a side note, and again, bringing in one more piece of lore, because these notes were so fascinating to me. I actually have it here.
Jenny collected all of the notes into a Word document for us.
Okay. Okay, artifact manifest. Note number 9 is an artifact manifest, and I thought it was super interesting. So the oaken music box is the one that I initially paid the most attention to because it has the letter J carved in the underside. I think it's one of the relics, so it's like the one that you're paying the most attention to. Go down a few lines to jar of earth, a jar containing earth from a meteor impact site, allegedly. There's another dialogue bit that talks about how a meteor has hit, and I'm pretty sure the meteor has hit Stellar Basin. I think Stellar, and I think the meteor
which is why
is actually the Kraken like being. So maybe that's not even from Earth. Like maybe it's an alien, or it had something that corrupted like the squid Kraken and made it into like something more corrupt. But I'm pretty sure the jar of earth references Stellar Basin's center.
That is incredible. And I think the space element is a common one.
And that's a very,
Eldritch Shore anyway. So,
yeah. So that's the one thing, because again, I've been poring over these notes trying to figure out. There's one that I quite haven't, and that is the Fisherman's Note 11. I think it's either going to be like way simple or I'm not getting it at all. I think it's just referring to like the ritual of collecting the 5 items, because the note says deep sky, deep forever, casket seal broken, fog core, 5 equals rise, he knows. And I'm pretty sure it just maybe just alludes to like the ritual of collecting the 5 relics to rise up some sort of power, but I don't know what the deep sky, deep forever means.
Well, fortunately, I've got all the answers.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And I'm just not going to share them at this time because I don't want to ruin it for everybody. Obviously, like we don't want to spoil things for people on this podcast. And
the podcast that we said was a spoiler.
Yep, and that's the only reason why I'm not telling you what the real meaning behind deep sky, deep forever is.
If any of you have figured it out, feel free. email, put it in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. Let me know. That's the one element that I'm just like, it's probably something super simple and I'm just not seeing it. But that's the one note I feel like I have not fully figured out.
It almost feels like I'm hearing like Taylor Swift lyrics. Deep sky forever. I don't know. It belongs on the folklore album, perhaps.
Yeah. Which I still have not listened to.
What?
Which I feel like as your friend, I'm like, I feel like I'm doing a disservice.
It hurts my heart that you have not listened to that or the superior version, the Long Pond Sessions. I'm a big Taylor Swift fan for those of you out here joining us. This is a video game podcast, though. That was like one side quest I thought was super interesting.
Yes.
I'd love to talk about some of the other three like areas and what their side quests were. But what was like your favorite besides the ones we've talked about so far?
I think the Twisted Strand one was maybe a favorite simply because Gale Cliffs, when you had to just like go through the sort of maze-like area, it just wasn't fun for me because I kept crashing. I just was not having a good time. Like it was a good time, but stressful. Stellar Basin, great, but I felt very relaxed throughout it because as long as you didn't go into the middle, you were actually quite fine.
And it was gorgeous.
And it was beautiful.
Like,
it was like
the
glowing.
bioluminescence of everything. It was absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and in Stellar Basin, I was like, this horror game isn't too bad. And then you go to the area Twisted Strand, which is the mangroves. So there are trees that sort of start to obstruct vision. They are lower trees.
It's a maze.
It's a maze. There are vines everywhere, both in the water and out. There are these creatures. I forget what mind suckers or whatever.
Mind suckers.
Yeah, the person that you meet, the air pilot, he calls them mind suckers because you get too close, they mess with your mind. But oh man, I loved this area because they hid under the water, and as you go by, they pop up, and your instinct will be to sail away. But if you do that, they will chase you. They are attracted to movement. And I love when games do that because the hardest thing to do in any situation for me when I'm in a horror game is to wait and to stop and just to like let the danger pass. And the whole time in Twisted Strand, it was a test of my willingness to just stop and let danger pass.
I didn't even have to. I think I saw them 2 times the entire time I was in there, and I saw them from so far away I just turned around and hit my turbo button and got away. Apart from like you have to actually catch 3 of them. Like, right. So I caught those 3, but like you're not
just
engaging with them.
Cruising through so fast? What was your speed? Do you know what your speed was?
I had 3 outboard motors at that point. None of them had been upgraded. I'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay.
And I had the turbo button, but like you could see the water start to bubble up in a unique way when those tentacle monsters were coming. And this is the first time I saw one bubbling. I was like, that looks bad. I'm turning around now. And like, as I'm turning around, I see like a tentacle eye pop or like swirl up. And I was like, okay, well, I got out of that one. I only saw them twice. So I never even like had to use the like stay still, like T-Rex moment.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, yeah. So for that area, that for me was my favorite because I was like, I'm pretty notorious at bumping my boat into things and like knocking stuff overboard. Oh my gosh, the number of times I would have to repair my boat simply because I was a bad driver. And the Twisted Strand was, like, as you said, really maze-like, and it had these sort of toadstools everywhere. The color was also super, I would say, like, oppressive almost. Yes. And the atmosphere, you don't see the blue sky and the clouds and the sunrise and sunset that you used to. You only see just fog. Like, it honestly reminded me a lot of the summer Oregon was on fire, basically. Where everything was just tinged orange and smoky. Yes. And it was like heavy. And being in that part of the world, I was like, this feels like when the fires were happening at their peak. And it felt very like that tension for me. That was like a personal experience I drew from that made it especially just enjoyable to be in that world, in the horror element of it.
So I also love that area. I thought that the Twisted Strand was one of my favorite like video game experiences
Mm-hmm.
in the game. The pilot gives you strong like think Vietnam War veteran vibe.
Yes.
Like a person has come back, they have seen some horrors, and so
Mm-hmm.
they are like survivalists. They are living on the strand by themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
like the setup of your side quest is if you bring him the right fish, he's going to set up bait for
Right.
the tentacle mind sucker guys, and he has traps set up, and so it's like you get your fish, you bait the trap. Is that the right verb?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you bait the trap. The tentacle monsters come, and he has built a mortar, and he fires a
He home
mortar.
alones.
He home alone.
The,
Yes,
he home alones.
he home
Twisted
alone's
Strand.
Twisted Strand. He sets up like little traps for the sticky bandits all over.
Yeah.
And I guess it'd be the wet bandits, and it's like Home Alone 1. And they, after like you bait the trap, you watch as they are like caught by a steel trap, and then a rocket blows them up. And it's just
absolutely wild.
it's hilarious. It's like such a cathartic, like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
fuck you, monsters. Like, I got it. You're going down. But it is also like, as opposed to the researcher, this dude is not right. Like, you can tell that
Yeah.
like he has been seriously traumatized by what's happening. He is twisted.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, his story was really interesting too, because at the end, because he, if I'm remembering correctly, when you approach him, he's like, this is kind of what I need to do to reach my catharsis.
Yes.
And then like I can leave this place. Because
Mhm.
he and his comrades all had like hunkered down at the base of this like giant tree.
Mhm.
And he's like, to honor my former comrades, I need to like do this and then I can leave. And at the end of it all, he's like, actually, it's my home.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stick around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah, I'm gonna live a completely isolated life. There are no other living
Mhm.
people here,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to just like, I guess, fish in the mangroves, and like this is gonna be my existence.
Yeah. Which I
Yeah.
was like, okay.
So like a
bye.
degree of acceptance. In the same way, can I shift to Gale?
Yes.
The Gale Cliffs. Gale Cliffs is like the first area that you go to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same way that you were talking about earlier. That like people have just accepted that there's a giant sea snake living
Yeah.
in the cliffs.
Yeah. And they say something, they're like, yeah, we've had to move. We all used to live over around here and most of us have moved down.
Literally lived like moved a block away.
I know. I'm like, you could maybe go a little bit further. But yeah, I thought that area was really, especially as a first sort of main area for the story quest, definitely a really fun one because it does set up a really specific tone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What was your experience?
Yeah, so in like the central side quest that's happening here, there are these two brothers. One is living in the ruins of the old city, one is living in the new city.
Mm-hmm.
And you're essentially, in order to progress, you have to blow up parts of the cliffs to get to the area where the specific relic is that you need.
Right.
And so the side quest you're engaged in is helping these two brothers reconcile.
Yes.
And they're missing something, right? Like one of them has lost like a family heirloom or something like that.
Yeah, it's like their crest,
yes.
I think. Like their family crest.
And so if you find the crest, you'll get one brother to take that crest to the other brother and reconcile in the new city. And I thought it was a really compelling story, like as a sub story. I thought it was like a really interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that these two brothers are so furious with each other while there is this goddamn sea snake right there.
I know.
It's just like, talk about priorities, man. Like, what is happening? So again, like that twisted, like they're not quite right. Something is off here.
Definitely. Yeah, I also thought it was hilarious because I'm like, you've all been through this very traumatic situation where there's clearly something that's like way worse than sort of this fifth familial dispute.
Yes.
At least in the sort of the grand scheme of things. But also, I guess that shows just as humans how perhaps, because I know, again, when we think about like the way that we deal with trauma in real life, it's like at a certain point, the big horrors of the world are happening, but also the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis are the ones that like, A, that you maybe can do something about, but B, they are just much more immediate to you. So it's like a sea snake being around. Well, I'm not on the ocean all the time, so I guess I cannot think about it. man, my brother really pisses me off, and I have to see his face when I go into town for food or something, like.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
So.
let's get our priorities in order here, people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I guess like coming back to that like central point though, it's like with very few exceptions, everyone is dealing with some degree of corruption of themselves in this game.
Which leaves us at Devil's Spine. And I'm very curious how you felt about sort of the main quest of Devil's Spine and the area itself.
Devil's Spine was the first time, again, this is the last quadrant of the game, so you are over 75% of the way through by the time you hit this. It is the first time that I questioned, am I actually someone else?
Yeah.
Is there something else happening here? So you go to Twisted Spine, the first place, or to Devil's Spine, the first place that you can go to is an ancient temple. It's kind of the closest, depending on where you leave from, it's likely the place that you go to first. And it's when you meet kind of the archetypal, what I would consider an archetypal eldritch character, which is like the fanatic.
Yes.
Someone that is actively working to bring this chaos energy monster into the world.
Yes.
And you have to light, so there are 3 braziers that are not lit on the temple island. You have to go and fetch the everlasting flame from 3 other places in Devil's Spine and take the flame back to the temple.
Did you also just sing the Olympics anthem the whole time? Because when I was
No.
like, dun, dun,
No,
dun, dun,
what?
dun. I was like, man, why? Because this is the only time you light big fires on things is like when they light the Olympic flame. And so I literally was just like, oh, this is like the Olympics.
Absolutely not. I was not in the headspace to be singing the incomparable John Williams score of the Olympics theme song. Absolutely not. That was the most terrifying. Devil's Spine, for those of you who have not yet played this space, is a lava field. There are jets of steam that are bursting throughout. You see lava in the water beneath you, and there are not panic-driven metaphorical fish. There are literal, like, barracuda-esque fish that if they see you, and they will see you from a long way off.
Yeah, they have the longest draw distance ever.
It is crazy. They will home in on your ship and essentially just swirl and majorly slow you down and make this incredibly fierce siren call, which draws a daddy barracuda fish.
Yes.
Or I think it's called the mother, literally.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, it's like some parent.
Yes, and that will come and just wreck your ship bad.
It's the worst.
It is, and like all around you are spooky ruins that are underwater. And so the idea that you, Jenny, are cruising through the most terrifying area in this game.
I'm not saying I wasn't scared.
No way. Yeah. Absolutely no way was I in a mental
you
space
cope
for this.
In the ways that you can. And for me, it was to try and sing a happy song. Or not happy, but it's just the most relatable song for fire and lighting things that I could think of.
Okay.
So yeah, that was really Devil's Spine for me. And in terms of lore, I guess, did you, in relation to the narrative, did you have any like character or any role that you put the fanatic in relation to the lore of the main story?
Shoot.
I'm curious. I'm not trying to do a gotcha.
No,
I'm just like trying to.
Jenny, I didn't draw any deeper connections about who this character actually was. Please tell me what I missed this time.
No, it's mostly because, again, I was just really excited to make the connection because I was just so bad at fishing. Again, at this point,
I'm happy to learn.
This point, I hadn't done very much fishing. My boat was weak, and that is actually a big difference.
Oh wait, you made this connection in your first trip to Devil's Spine?
Yes, this was something, and this was one of the moments where I was like, wait. And this was actually one of the like light bulb moments for me.
Okay, this actually makes me feel way better.
Yeah.
Because if I had maybe had this light bulb moment, maybe I would have been more attentive to the storyline.
Yeah.
And because you went to Devil's Spine first.
Oh, I didn't meet him first.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Never mind, everyone. I still feel bad.
No.
I almost got to feel good about myself. I'm reeling it back in. I feel bad about myself again. Please proceed.
Okay, so this is, I guess, technically the second time I went to Devil's Spine, but the first was really just like a bloop, just a U-turn on out, basically.
Okay. Yep.
at Devil's Spine, you talk to the fanatic, and in sort of the archetypal way, he has a moment where he talks about how he knew you from before.
I missed this, yeah.
And through this conversation, my interpretation was that he was actually the old mayor from when you were fishing that first time with your wife. That's how he recognizes you. And he was kind of there when the brunt of the horrors were all unleashed. And now he is over in Devil's Spine. And you, I think, hear other people.
Hold on a second. You're saying that the red robed fanatic that you meet at the temple is the old mayor?
I think he's the old mayor.
He is not.
What?
And
no way.
Here's how.
For sure?
For sure. Because the reason I told you all that I was probably 90% of the game before I figured out that I was someone. So there is a little island to the south of the Devil's Spine, and you actually meet the old mayor there. And so
what?
it was like I had just lit the last brazier.
No way.
I had not yet I had picked up the relic.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to head back to Little Morrow. And I was like, oh, you know what? There's a little tiny island here, and it's close enough. I feel safe. It's 6 a.m. I'm going to make it.
Oh my gosh.
And I went south to the island, and there is the old mayor.
I totally missed that.
He looks gaunt. He's in rags. He's completely insane. And he drops this clue about who you are. And I cannot remember what it was.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh my God, like I am the old fisherman. And but that's all I figured out, was that I was the old fisherman. I did not realize it was the old fisherman at that point that had summoned the initial horror with his wife. So I had not drawn that larger conclusion.
I love that we both got there with such different pieces of the pie.
I needed to actually meet the guy. You were like, oh yeah, I think this is a reasonable conclusion to draw.
Well, and I was telling you before this conversation, but like, I love this because even though like you did not focus on the notes and I focused on the notes, you found, like, I didn't even know he was there. I haven't even gotten there in my second playthrough, so now I know to look for this guy. Go find him. Which that's so cool. But also it reminds me so much of Outer Wilds, where as you play it, and for folks who don't know what Outer Wilds is, it's a game where you play this sort of alien called a Harthian whose mission is to explore space. But as you explore these planets, you start finding things that lead to a larger mystery that needs to be solved. And that's all I'll leave it at.
But also similarly to Dredge, you can go anywhere you want as soon as the game starts, just like in Dredge.
And what I love about Outer Wilds is that element of you can go anywhere and search up anything, and you can put the puzzle together in your own way and find your path to the solution, quote unquote. And I feel like in a sort of smaller scale, Dredge allows that to happen too, through either interactions with some of the characters that you meet in each of the areas, or if you are a notes fiend, you can also like read the notes as well.
So I'd love to kind of shift us towards the end game and tell you how I got there and what my experience was.
Yes.
So to recap, I've just finished Devil's Spine. It's the last quadrant of the story to unfold. You get the last relic there. And I met the mayor, and he tells me like I'm the old fisherman.
Yes.
And this is the one clue he gives you, is that the lighthouse keeper like was there, knows what's going on. And so because I had that conversation before I went to return the relic, I went to talk to the lighthouse keeper, and there was a new line of dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I found the old mayor, and that's when she tells me that like, you are the old fisherman, and like I think she might tell you that like the red book was yours, because that's also what is driving that red book is driving the mayor insane, like all this stuff. And so I don't know if you get this option if you have not talked to the mayor and the lighthouse keeper. So tell me if you got the same thing.
I didn't, because I never went back to like talk to her, so I don't even know if there was that option.
So, well, I guess the option when you go to the relic collector at the end of the game. So at the end of the game, when you go back to the relic collector and you like, here's your last relic, and it's basically you have the opportunity at that point to confront the situation and say like, you are me and I am you, and we are us together.
Yes.
And you don't have to do that. You can play through the end of the game without ever confronting the truth that you are the relic collector and that you have always owned this red book. And once you deliver, here's like your major opportunity to bail out if you want to skip spoilers, because we are at the literal point of no return.
Spoiled all of it.
Yes, the point of no return. So you hit the final relic, you hand it over, and you have the option of like confronting this truth about yourself or not. I chose to confront it, and I was like, okay, I am trying to resurrect my dead wife.
Right.
That is actually what I've been working towards this whole time, which I did not know.
Yeah.
And you know, you say yes if you're gonna say yes, and I did not ask any questions. I was like, I'm gonna fucking bring back my dead wife. The builder isn't giving me anything. Like, I'm getting into it. So you drive towards this like red light in the sea that you've been seeing this whole time, and you can execute the final actions to resurrect
the ritual.
Yeah, you can do the ritual to bring your wife back and simultaneously release this horror into the world. And I just did that.
My first ending was the one that you chose, to resurrect your wife. Did you go back to the point of no return and play for the other?
No, tell me the other ending.
Okay, so what you can also do is choose basically to not, and you basically sail off into, what is it? Like the ocean, and you have the ability to just put the book to rest, and you are actually eaten up by this Leviathan. And you are basically sacrificing yourself so that the horrors stop there. Yeah. And what's absolutely wild, which we haven't talked about this, but you know how the map has the dotted line around it, the circle?
Yeah, the Dragon Ball radar, yes.
Yes. I presume you have not tried to go past it.
Of course not.
If you do, there is actually a Leviathan that will like stop you from going beyond the borders of the map, which is, from a development perspective, makes sense.
Perfect.
Because it's like, you don't want the player kind of going beyond the confines of what you've built.
Yeah.
But from a narrative perspective, it felt very much like, after I got the second ending, I was like, what if the Leviathan doesn't want you going out into the world? Like, it wants you to stay in this area because it's trying to like protect.
Like the Leviathan is a good guy.
Like the Leviathan is a good guy. Yeah.
I love this interpretation of the ending, Jenny. That is so good.
I have to admit, I personally kind of prefer the bad ending because I feel like as a character it makes more sense for you to be like, at least the way that I played it, to be like, no, I'm going through with this, I've done all of this. But I think also both endings are really, I personally found them pretty enjoyable from a player standpoint.
Yeah
I don't know, what'd you think?
So the thing for me is, because all of these conclusions about who you are came for me literally in my last 20 to 30 minutes playing the game. For me, it felt like, oh my gosh, this is all so surprising. There weren't any clues along the way. And Jenny has helped me realize there were lots of clues along the way. And so it was really more that like, I chose not to engage with the game at the level where you like, basically I was so much just like, I'm just doing what people are telling me to do and not questioning why I'm doing it, because it's like, well, it's a game and I'm supposed to do what I'm being told to do.
Yeah.
And I did not engage with it at the level that I wish I would have now, where I could have been like, well, my character actually did not spend any time out at night unless it was absolutely necessary. He's probably not very corrupted, and he probably wouldn't try to bring this thing into the world. And I think I really wish that I had engaged with the game at that level, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Like the role-playing side of it.
But I think what's kind of interesting, going back to the idea of halves and fragments of your personality and fragments of yourself, and how do you cope with grief, especially, like, that's a really interesting way to role-play it without even role-playing. You know what I mean? Like, you were the fisherman who was like, I'm not going to engage with this. I'm doing what I'm meant to do, and that's fish. And I think that's a really, just to reflect on it, kind of an interesting way to think about it in the context of, if this is a game about a person grieving and the ways that he is choosing to grieve.
That is so interesting. I'm going to draw a connection to a podcast episode that I was listening to earlier this week from NADPod, not another D&D podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They do a thing called Dungeon Court, where people write in like
Mm-hmm.
game scenarios. They were talking about how they were trying to convince a farmer who had an NPC dog that was really cute named Fig Newton to join the party. And the party member rolled like a 23, like a super high roll,
yeah,
to convince the dog's owner to let the dog come with them. And the way they did it was by saying, your dog is the secret to saving the world. And like that was like the narrative explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And how, and like the entire group that was on the podcast, and how I feel is like, the world can fucking burn, you are not taking my dog. And so applying that to this scenario, it's like, the world can burn, I'm resurrecting my wife. Like, yeah, I guess there's like that role-playing element of it is very much there, I think. And I guess to your point, because I had confronted the truth that I am the relic collector, I think within game, it also makes sense that it's like, well, once that schism has been repaired and you come back to like, I'm a whole person again, it does make sense that it's like, no, I would, as a character, make this choice. Like, I have been, a part of me has always been pushing towards this end. Now that part of me has been like reincorporated into how I see the world. So yeah, I'm going to let it burn. It's very Usher.
It is very Usher. Yeah, I really liked this game. I think it has been really interesting embracing just horror as a genre. I feel like I've learned a lot this month about, because I very much was like, horror is either like super atmospheric or jump scares. And I kind of like put it in those two dichotomies.
Yeah.
And especially this month, getting to talk through like different media, like we talked in the Discord about books as well as movies, as well as shows, as well as games, and how they differ in the ways that they can allow you to immerse yourselves in horror. It's been a really cool month to just like fall in love with this genre that I didn't think had sort of space for me to really love.
I totally agree. It's totally changed. Like, my understanding of what horror is has completely changed over the last month because of the interviews, because of the conversation with our community members in the Discord channel. Like, I now see horror and what makes it effective very differently than I did before. I'd love to talk about that a little bit. Like, how has like your thoughts on horror, like how have they maybe matured, or like how has your relationship to horror changed over the last month?
I think I'll keep it short because I know we're also getting pretty high on the time right now. But I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed learning is the relationship with humor and horror in particular.
Yeah, same.
The fact that like looking in narratively, the structures that you use to create effective humorous pieces and effective horror mirror one another. And just like ex-English teacher, I never really got to explore that when I was teaching my kiddos. And so like seeing that, I was like, oh my gosh, I like almost wish I was back teaching because I would love to do a unit on this. Like this would be so fun.
I totally agree.
Just nerding out on lesson plans. And so the relationship between building up tension and then the twist at the end, with humor ending in a pleasant surprise that you are able to laugh at, and horror ending in a surprise that you are reeling back from, essentially. I think that's such a great way to think about it, and that is one of the things that really was a light bulb moment that changed the way I thought about horror. But also just as a whole, the way horror now, especially in film, I feel like is being taken on, and stories are being told that haven't been told before because they're coming from people who haven't traditionally been represented in horror. I think that for me is the most exciting part.
That is exciting. I agree.
Yeah. What about you?
I would agree with literally every single word that you just said. And I'm going to add something that you said earlier in this episode, which is oftentimes horror is the thing that doesn't happen. And so like that idea of something is slithering towards your boat and it doesn't get on. Sometimes the door opens and it's silent. It doesn't creak. That idea of like, you have to subvert the expectation in order for it to be effective horror. I think that's a big like kind of lesson for me in understanding of the genre and appreciating it.
So cool. Well, I think that's it for
I
our
think that's it.
conversation for Dredge. Again, if you are all excited, please let us know any of your final thoughts on the game this month, as well as Slay the Princess or any of the other media that you experienced and connected as you played. Find us at geeksandgrounds.com, and you can also find all the social channels where you can leave comments or email us. And Joel, where can folks find you?
I'm at my Grand Falloon on basically every social. How about you?
Nice. I'm at Kimchica on most everywhere except Twitter, and on there I'm Kimchica25.
Same call that we made last time. Like, we're at the point now, we love it if you've been part of our community or just listening along. If you wouldn't mind rating our podcast or leaving a review, that would be super helpful for us.
Yeah.
We're trying to get the word out about what we're doing. We're really enjoying having these conversations. I feel like it's been a kind of a point of personal growth for me. I've learned a lot over the last few months. It's been
learned
great
a lot
engaging.
too.
Well, thanks everyone for joining in with us in the Dredge conversation and for listening along. As always, geeksandgrounds.com if you're interested in learning more, seeing the newsletter.
Yep.
Anything else? Any items of business before we wrap up today?
Nope. Excited for June. Be on the lookout for that announcement very soon. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Well, from all of us in Geeks and Grounds, if the water's deep, the percolating's gonna take longer for the grounds to become drinkable coffee.
I feel like you should have rhymed with steep, like tea. That would have been nice.
You know, next month is gonna be our best closing yet.
There's always next month, y'all.
All right, everyone. Bye.
Bye.